Hi, my name is Jeanette and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. Today I'm going to be sharing a wrap up of all the books that I read in the month of April. So I read 10 books over the course of the month, which was a really good reading month for me because I only had 7 books on my TBR. So that's amazing. So the first 2 books I read were Blind Trust by Terry Blackstock and Broken Wings by Terry Blackstock. This is books 3 and 4 of her Second Chances series that I had started in March. Now these both were rereads for me, but I had read them probably about 10 years ago, so I decided to reread them and see what I thought this time around. So Blind Trust picks up with one of the characters, or 2 of the characters that we had met in the previous book. So the back just briefly says, 2 weeks before he was to marry Sherry Grayson, Clint Jessup disappeared without a trace. Now, suddenly, 8 months later, he's back with no word of explanation, only an impossible request. Trust him. So I rated this book a 3 out of 5. I didn't really enjoy it as much as I kind of expected to enjoy it. Sherry really annoyed me. I just felt like that she acted kind of childish and it was all about me. And it didn't matter that Clint was trying to do what he thought was the right thing, but he wasn't able to trust or to tell Sherry. He wasn't allowed to tell Sherry until it was over. Which, I mean, I understand from Sherry's perspective. He disappeared, can't explain any reason for it. He said he loved her, but then he's got no reason for leaving or can't tell her why he left. So, obviously, she's struggling with that. But it's still, I don't know. She just rubbed me the wrong way. So, yeah, I didn't enjoy it as much. Then the next book was Broken Wings, which is book 4. Now, this one, I didn't feel like it really fit as much as the first 3 books because the first book focuses on Wes. Then book number 2, one of the main characters is Wes's best friend and old roommate. And then book 3 is Sherry, is Wes's sister. Then book 4 features Erin, who is one of Sherry's roommates. So, I mean, she's connected, but not really connected in the family. I don't know, because we only met Erin in book 3, whereas the other ones we met Sherry in book 1. So I don't know, it felt off to me. This one also felt much more of a mystery suspense line than a romance story. They are marketed as suspense, but the other 3 really felt much more romance genre type. So anyways, this one focuses on Aaron Russell, who is a pilot, and Addison Lowe, who is a National Transportation Safety Board investigator. So Addison has come to town after a plane crash has happened and he needs to investigate the cause of the crash. And Aaron was supposed to be on the plane, but due to unforeseen circumstances, she missed the flight, but she has flown with the pilot numerous times before. So Addison has to interview Aaron to kind of get a feel for what was the pilot like, how did he react in certain situations beforehand. I felt for both characters because they're both going through struggles. I mean, Erin should have been on the flight and she wasn't, so now she's grieving everything that happened with that flight, and kind of the guilt that she's feeling for not being on part of it. And then Addison is pushing to try to get answers, but he's being pushed by his bosses just to wrap up the case. So I really enjoyed Addison because he kept digging until he was sure of the result instead of caving to pressure and just determining, yeah, it was pilot error. So I liked that he kept digging to try to find the real reason that everything happened. I really preferred the men in all these series than the women characters. I don't know, most of the women kind of just really irked me. I was drawn to the men. So in the end, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I'm not saying that Terry Blackstock's a bad writer. It's just these are some of her older works, and I think she's gotten much better over the years. So I personally would pass and probably won't reread them again. Then the next book I read on my Kindle. I think all the rest of the books are Kindle books that I read. So the next book was Fatal Convictions by Randy Singer. This is a legal thriller. Randy comes from a lawyer background, and then went into practicing law before he became a writer. And now, from what I understand, he also works at a church as like a pastor associate or something like that. So anyways, this book focuses on Alex Madison, who is a part-time pastor and a part-time lawyer, is what he that's how the back describes him. So this one is set in Virginia Beach. Alex Madison. Alex is the main character that we follow throughout the course of the story. He has been hired to defend a Muslim leader who has been charged with instigating honor killings. Now, honor killings are the killing of people who have turned their back on Islam and converted to Christianity. This book included some very gruesome and intense scenes with the killing. Due to the dark subject matter, I had to take breaks at times and put it down and kind of like, okay, I can't keep reading this. But, put it down, like, kind of break for the day and pick it up the next day. It's not like I took long-term breaks. I just couldn't read it for hours on end like I probably can when I get sucked into other books. But because of the case that he's defending, it becomes a very publicized, big story. So then, obviously, the church, because he's also the pastor of the church is not liking some of the publicity that is coming out. I felt that the church conflict with the church board and Alex's position felt very real. I could totally understand. I could see this happening. And I really connected with the characters in this story. I don't know a lot about Islam and some of their culture and their habits. So it was very interesting to learn a bit more about that and kind of see their perspective and how they see Allah and stuff like that. I did not like some of the personal relationships. Like, it's not a romance book, but there is a little romantic plot line possibly between Alex and one of the daughter that's involved. And she is practicing Islam. And I did not like how there was a possibility of the two of them ending up together because he's a Christian. And so they're two different beliefs. And it just, I expected more from the pastor side of it. Like, I expected him to act a little bit differently. But, I don't want to say what happened, but I'm happy with the way things turned out. I really, really enjoyed that there was an epilogue at the end that kind of told us where Alex is now, kind of what's going on. And I was happy with the way it ended because obviously the story ended with the jury verdict, right? But then there was a little wrap up. The epilogue gave you like, okay, a year later now Alex is doing this. So has he become a full-time pastor? Has he become a full-time lawyer? Or has he learned to juggle both and kind of work them together? So I really enjoyed this story. I really enjoyed following the courtroom scenes, the research of it, but it was definitely the characters that drew me in. I wanted to know what was going to happen with Alex. One of the quotes that I took, which was, everybody could use, is your job is to do the right thing. If people can't handle it, that's their problem, not yours. Do you want me to repeat that? Your job is to do the right thing. If people can't handle that, it's their problem, not yours. So in the end, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Just know that there are some gruesome, detailed scenes with the murder. So then after that book, I decided to pick up Juliet and the Monday Mandates by Becky Doughty. This is book 1 of the Gustafins Girls book. It focuses on 4 sisters, who are the girls. And after reading a heavy book, I was hoping for a lighthearted read. And so I kind of expected this one to be that. It's a contemporary romance. And I had this one on my TBR because I had heard about it quite a few years ago from a blogger that I follow. And so I added it then, but I never got to it. And then I'm doing Chantel's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. And for the month of April, it was read a book with your initials in the title. And my initials are JS. So this was the only book I had on my TBR which had a J in it. And thankfully it had an S in it. So it fit. So this one focuses on Juliet, who is one of the sisters. She has recently gone through a breakup with her long-term boyfriend, and her sisters decide it is time for her to start dating again. So they set her up on a series of blind dates. These blind dates don't go well, some of them. So this is why, because on the back cover it's promoted as, obviously the title also gives it away, the Monday Mandates. But it's promoted as, that some of the dates don't go well, so you think it's going to be a comedy type situation. And it was to a certain extent, but then it wasn't. During one of the dates, Juliet ends up accepting Jesus into her heart. So then the book goes on to follow her progress, kind of what's happening and her learning about God, starting to attend church, getting to know more, which I really enjoyed. So it had a very good, heavy faith element in it. But then she also runs into a police officer, Victor, who is not one of the date guys, but he pulls her over, and that's when they first meet. Then he ends up pulling her over again, and then they end up having run-ins with each other multiple times. The first time, it was funny. The second time, okay. Third time, fourth time, it was like, okay, this is just being forced. This is weird. I don't know. And then Victor is promoted as a Christian. He ends up already attending the church that Juliet starts going to. But his attitude towards Juliet and the way he treated her at times, I did not like. He again rubbed me the wrong way. Then there is an incident that happens with the ex-boyfriend. So we know the whole incident, like we witnessed the incident. But then it ends and the story ends. So we have no idea. We're not told what happened to the ex-boyfriend. And it was like, okay, I felt lost. And I didn't connect with the girls. I didn't like Victor. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It held my interest, but not enough. And I have no desire to pick up the rest of the books in the series. So that was a disappointing read. So then I decided to pick up a book that was not on my TBR list, so I kind of added an extra book. And that was Safehouse Exposed. Now, I did read this one in physical because a friend loaned it to me, but I've already returned it to her, so we'll have to insert a picture here. So this is a love-inspired suspense. It's by Darlene L. Turner. This is her fourth book with the love-inspired suspense. I've read all 3 and really enjoyed them. And This one is set in Niagara Falls, Ontario. So I've been there. Canada's my home. So that was interesting. I like that. Darlene is a Canadian author. So it focuses on Emma James, who is a Border Patrol officer, and her 4-year-old daughter Sierra. Then the other main character is Madison James, who is the brother-in-law to Emma, and he is a police officer. So there is a lot of action in this book. The title, again, kind of gives it away, Safehouse Exposed. So Emma and her daughter have been sent to a safe house for protection from backlash from a case that she had investigated, I guess. And Madison has been sent, not Madison, Mason has been sent to protect her. And somebody seems to know what's going on. They know where they're going to be, what safe house they're going to be at. So they have to keep moving on to the next safe house and to the next safe house. And so they were constantly on the run. There was a lot of action throughout the book. However, I felt like I'd already read the character relationship storyline before. When I first started the book and kind of got to know kind of what the relationship was, I'm like, I feel like I've read this book. Or I've read, like, it felt very familiar to me. And then, but I didn't know the case. I didn't know the suspense side of it. And I was like, and I know, I mean, this book just came out in March. So I knew I hadn't read it. So that was kind of frustrating a little bit because it felt, okay, so as we get further, this is what's going to happen. She's going to tell him this and he's going to know. And that was very disappointing to me. After I finished the book, then I kind of went through my books read before, and I know what book. It's another love-inspired book that this was totally reminding me of. So in the end, though, I still gave this 4 out of 5 stars because I read this book in a day. I did not want to put it down. I enjoyed the suspense side of it, the mystery, trying to figure out who was behind what was happening. And if I hadn't read a lot of love-inspired suspense books before, I probably would have connected with the characters more, and the whole relationship thing wouldn't have bothered me as much. So then the next book I read was Providence by Carla Laureano. This book just came out in August. I had pre-ordered at the time, so finally I read it 6 months after I got it. This is a contemporary romance. It focuses on Kendall Green, who is an interior designer in LA and was raised in foster care. Then the second main character is Gabe Brandt, who is the mayor of Jasper Lake, Colorado. So Kendall has just discovered that she has inherited a property in Colorado from her late grandmother. She never knew this grandmother, didn't know that she even had family. Her first instinct is, oh, okay, I'll sell it and invest in my business. So she goes out to Colorado to see the property and kind of do all the dealings with it, and meets Gabe. Gabe takes her to the property, shows her the property, but he doesn't want her to sell the property. So his motivation is to get her to fall in love with the property, want to keep it and help the town. Where she's like, I just want money to go back. So it was very interesting between the two of them. I really, really enjoyed this story. And again, there is a faith element in it because Kendall, growing up in foster care, feels like, my mother didn't want me. She has no idea who her father is and has kind of moved from house to house. So she's very reliant on herself. And so she, why? There's not a God that loves me. Like, if he loves me, I wouldn't have grown up this way. So Gabe is trying to teach her about this. So there's definitely the faith element in it. I really enjoyed the setting of Colorado, the characters of the town and the welcoming. I mean, Kendall's only there for a couple weeks to kind of wrap everything up, and they accept her as a friend, want to get to know her. I really, really enjoyed that. And one of the quotes that I took from it is, God takes us as we are, broken and confused and unfaithful and insecure. All we have to do is accept him. I gave this book 5 out of 5, and it's probably in the running for one of my favorites of the year. It was definitely my favorite of the month, I would say. So then the next book I read was Too Close to Home by Lynette Eason. This is book 1 of her Women of Justice series. Now, this is an older series. This is actually the book that introduced me to Lynette Eason's writing. It is a romantic suspense, and it focuses on Connor Wolfe, who is a police officer or a police detective, and Samantha Cash, who is an FBI computer forensic. The setting is South Carolina, and Connor has a 16-year-old daughter, Jenna, who he doesn't have the best relationship with. So the case that Connor is working on and Samantha gets brought in to help is girls are being kidnapped, and then they turn up dead, and they're found to have been pregnant at some point between their kidnapping and their recovery, their finding. And so they're leading, how do we stop the kidnapping? How are the kidnappers getting these girls? And what's happening in between the time that they turn up dead? I really, really enjoyed this story. I loved that we got Connor's perspective, Samantha's perspective, and the perspective of the villain. He was called the agent. There was one section in it near the end when the agent is revealed, and I was like, how is that possible? Because weren't they in this scene back here, and this happened, and like, so it really made me wonder, like, okay, did I miss something, or was this not written correctly? Was it hinted at and I didn't see it? So I had to go back and read the incident that I knew had happened, and it's like, okay, how is he involved? And when I went back and read it, it was like, oh, okay, I missed it. So, I mean, that, I was happy that it was my mistake. So, obviously with Connor investigating girls being kidnapped, teenage girls, and he has a teenage daughter at home, things are on edge, very. I really, really liked these characters. I gave this book 5 out of 5. It was a reread for me, and if this was my first time reading this book, I would have still picked up more books by Lynette Eason, just like it did for me back 10, 12 years ago. So then I carried on with that series and picked up book number 2, which is Don't Look Back. This one focuses on Samantha's sister, Jamie, who was kidnapped as a teenager and held, and then was able to escape. Now, this was not the same kidnapper as the case from before. So Jamie has struggled with everything that she went through as a young girl, as a young woman, and has only just recently she spent 12 years almost as an agoraphobic, where she wouldn't leave the house by herself. She'd rather stay at home all the time. If she went out, somebody was with her to go out. And so she's been working with a therapist to kind of get over this, and she has now finished her college degree. And she has just, within the last 6 months or so of the book starting, she has become a forensic anthropologist. And so then she is called into a case where bones have been found, and it looks like it was because as a result of a kidnapping and a possible serial killer. And then as they start digging more into it, it looks to be the same kidnapper that Jamie was kidnapped by years ago. So the FBI is working, and that's Dakota Richards is the FBI agent. It was difficult to read what Jamie had experienced in her kidnapping time. But I really liked Dakota and how he was patient with Jamie and didn't push her, and he respected her to take the lead in the case and in their relationship. I really enjoyed that we got to spend more time with Samantha and Connor from book one because, I mean, Jamie is Samantha's sister. So they were very involved in the case. And Dakota was involved in the previous case as well. So we knew most of the characters from book one were in book two. This was probably my favorite of the series. So I gave this 5 out of 5. Again, I love this book. And I totally would have, if it was my first time reading it, I would have picked up more Lynette Eason books again. Now, book number 3 is A Killer Among Us. This one focuses on Kit Kenyon, who is a detective and a hostage negotiator, and Noah Lambert, who is a detective. So these two have just recently been put together as partners. And I did not enjoy this book as much as the previous two. It had some of the characters from the previous books, but it really felt separate. It didn't connect as well to the series as the first two, for me. And there were places where the timeline or the facts didn't match up and made it seem like it was unpolished, like it seemed like there was things missing. For example, they find a body and then they go to investigate, and when they're interviewing a possible, like a suspect, I guess, they say to him, "Where were you last night between this time and this time?" Because the body was found. And I'm like, I don't think the body was found last night because Kit was in the hospital last night. So the body was found the morning before she ended up in the hospital that night. And I reread it a few times, like, am I off on the timeline? But no, I wasn't. Like, the body was found on Tuesday, and then Kit ends up in the hospital Tuesday night, so then they're interviewing this witness Wednesday afternoon, and they ask him, where were you Tuesday night? And it was like, well, it should be, where was he Monday night, because the body was found Tuesday morning. But so that happened a few times, so that really, really bothered me. But a quote that I took from this that stuck with me that I really enjoyed was, "Family is not just made up of people who share the same blood. It's made up of people who love you." I really like that because that's true. Like, you can't choose your family, but you can make a family of your choosing, right? Did I say that right? You can't choose your family by blood, but you can make your own. Yeah, that is what I meant to say. So in the end, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. But again, because I'd read the first two, I would totally pick up more Lynette Eason books, and I have picked up more Lynette Eason books. So then the last book I read for the month was Laurel's Dream by Pepper Basham. This is a historical romance set in the early 1900s, and it's set in the Blue Ridge Mountains in the States. Laurel McAdams is a mountain girl who grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She's about 19. And then the second character is Jonathan Taylor, who is from England. He has come over to the mountains to be a teacher, but he's also in the process of becoming a doctor. Due to personal reasons, he is unable to fight in the war that's going on at this time, and he had to stop his college, his doctor degree, so he's doing this right now. At times, I found the language a little bit hard to read due to the broken English, and I just I found it hard to follow what was going on, and I found that it moved slow. I did like the characters of Laurel and Jonathan. However, I was thrown off almost every single time because Jonathan is always referred to as Jonathan Taylor. It was always Jonathan Taylor did this. Jonathan Taylor went here. And it was like, all I could think of was the actor Jonathan Taylor Thomas. But as a boy, when he was in Home Improvement, because me and my husband just recently watched a couple of seasons of Home Improvement. And I don't know, it was the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, well, that doesn't fit a 21-year-old guy who's British, and it just, but that's a personal thing, right? That has nothing to do, like, the author can name the character whatever he wants, and we're going to connect it with whatever our minds connect it with, right? So I did find that the story moved slow, and when I stopped, like, I read a bit and then I had to put it down to do something else, and then I'd come back to it, I couldn't remember where I'd left off, what had last happened. So then I had to go back and read like the last paragraph of that chapter before to remind myself where I was. And that doesn't normally happen to me. I'm normally very good at remembering what just happened before I pick it up again. So in the end, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. However, I do have a quote to share. I don't know what I'd do without the imagination of books to take me places. They're truly one of the underappreciated treasures in this world. Now, what book lover cannot relate to that? So those were the 10 books I read in the month of April. And so I had good reads and kind of some not so good reads, not as enjoyable reads. But you never know, right? That's the way it is. You hope they're all good reads, but there are going to be some that are going to be disappointing. So that's what I read. How was your month of April? Is there any books have you read any of these? Do you have different opinions than me? What should I be reading next? Do you have any recommendations based on kind of what I've said a little bit? I'd like to just chat in the comments below. Thank you very much and have a good day.